Hello, welcome, ladies and gentlemen,
Howdy,
to
howdy.
You Interrupted It, episode 5 of The Owl Nest. Welcome back, your two favorite plat, gold, silver players in Overwatch. That's where we stand on the ladder of things. Wouldn't say we're all too impressive, hence why we're probably not qualified to talk about how
We
people
are
should be
plenty
playing
qualified.
Overwatch. I don't know about that one.
I could outplay Paris.
Why-
1v5 me.
Wait, why is Paris the bar of? Why wouldn't you do Vancouver? Or it's just like
Because
they're like so much worse than you individually that you're like, oh, they're not even a
Yeah,
challenge.
Vancouver. Who's Vancouver? Are they a team
Oh,
in the
okay.
league? What?
All
I
right.
haven't seen them play at all.
We had it's a good time here. Good old week of matches. But before we talk about matches, just today is the 6-year anniversary since Overwatch was released. Overwatch
Happy
Uno.
birthday to you.
All right. I didn't start playing when Overwatch first came out. I started playing in September of 16. So I was, what is that, like 4 months late to the party, but I mean, still the same. Still started playing in release year, but you didn't start playing till what, 2018?
Yeah, 2018, 19, 20, late 2018.
You were like
yeah.
2.5 years behind the curve.
Yeah, because those first 2 years, the year it came out and the next one, I was living in Taiwan and wasn't playing any games.
That sounds okay. Yeah, I've been playing it for almost 6 years now, and I've put so much time into that game, and its associated parts, such as this. Here we are.
What? You like Overwatch?
Here we
I
are.
would have never guessed.
But it's fun. It's 6 years. That's a long time to be playing a video game for, though. And I will continue to play it until it gets beat into the ground by Overwatch 2, but we're not there yet. Overwatch 2 doesn't exist. So we're still here. We're still here playing Overwatch 1 and crying our sadness away on 2CP. But
Tragic.
such as
every time a 2CP map comes up, I'm just
you lose a year
so
off your life.
into it. Yeah. But that being said, it's like it's been really cool to see like my journey through Overwatch, because it's like I look at when I first started playing, where it was just I got a good deal on it and so I bought it, and I just occasionally played it.
Mhm.
And just to see how much when I first started, I had this group that played with me regularly, and then that kind of broke away, and it's just cool to see how as my life has evolved since it's come out,
Mhm.
like the game's kind of evolved to fit it as well, and it's just really cool to see that, and so I'm really, it's easy to get caught up in the complaints about Overwatch and complaints against Blizzard and stuff like that, but it's like this game has really had a big impact on my life.
It has had a massive impact on my life. Best $60 I've ever spent when I bought the Xbox version, because I started as a console pleb, but I've since leveled up. I am no longer a lower race.
That's funny.
But
so
enough about the game itself.
Yeah. So random side note, so I mentioned I was in Taiwan, wasn't really gaming. I came back to the US, and the place I live in the US, it's really dry. And when I first came back, I was like dying. My lips were just always
I know where this is going.
dang chapped. And I was like, and when I was a kid, I would go to the store and I'd always see cool stuff, but I'd never really get it. But as an adult, now I know I can go to the store and get beautiful things such as Mountain Dew chapstick. Isn't that crazy? Now, not only do you get Mountain Dew flavor by drinking the drink, but you can get the chapstick too.
I hate it here.
Mountain Dew.
Taste put the rainbow on your lips.
Taste the
put the dew of mountains on your lips.
But yeah, this product, it's amazing. It's so amazing. It would even it shocked me.
Gosh,
and made me really glad.
Gosh, dang it.
Which reminds me, there was a match this week, Shock versus Glads.
I hate it here. Why did you have to use that? Why did you have to use Mountain? You know what? I'm just gonna leave it. Glad Shock. Gladiators fans are sad once again. Not only did they get reverse swept last week, they do it again. They run it back.
Okay, that being said, before we get too far into this, it was against a good team. So it's like
it was. I mean,
yeah,
it was
they got
against
reverse
the
swept.
two best teams in NA.
Yeah.
Like,
so it's like
arguably.
Yeah, they got reverse swept again. But it was against the Shock. But it does suck. It was painful.
Having it
to
happen
watch.
again is not ideal.
Yeah, and it was close. It was another one of those matches where like it was really competitive, and from the beginning it could have gone either way.
Yeah, I the interesting thing though is like I didn't think that the Glads were playing inherently bad, at least for the first half of the series. And then as time went on though, you started to see some like small mistakes creep in. Like Kevster wasn't doing the same amount with his pulse bombs, or Astro had like an Ajax beat or two. And I mean, a Shock were adjusting as well. We saw them like come out using Brig and Ash and stuff on Route 66, and then they started using like Moira and stuff towards the tail end. But I think a lot of it was Glads just kind of slowly boomed themselves as time went on. I think they may have gotten in their own heads.
Yeah. Yeah, it's hard to say for sure what it was. I think part of it was definitely there were certain maps that the Glads were getting hardcore DPS diffed.
Yeah.
I thought the Glads, like I felt Reiner did really solid the whole series.
As did Kevster for the most part.
And Kevster did pretty good. Patty was mostly all right.
See, it's like...
But even Kevster, I feel like Kevster, he did good, but was he really outplaying Proper?
I felt like Proper was doing okay, but he wasn't taking over the server like we expected him to do. So I feel like Kevster and Proper were going hand in hand. But Patapon was getting diffed by Kilo on the soldier play. And it was interesting that the Glads decided to come into this match and go back to the Patapon Kevster lineup. I thought that last week when they were playing Ons Kevster, Ons was doing wonders on that 76. I mean, they still got reverse swept, but I feel like he was out. He was playing better than Patapon was to this week, and like he was at the beginning of the season, because I just don't think that he's, and I don't know if it's his fault or if it's like the Glads as a team, they just don't seem like they get as much out of the 76 as Shock were, and even as other teams were. Like I was looking at some of the stats comparing like Glads as a team and even Patapon as a 76 player, and like Patapon is like 13th or 14th out of 15 soldier players in terms of like visor efficiency, final blows, limbs, deaths. Like he's just not getting the value that you should be getting out of soldier. And I don't know if that's his fault. I know it always seems like there's a disconnect between him and Reiner. We saw that at the beginning of the season when Patapon was playing Genji. He kind of was just going in and trying to clutch fights he didn't need to clutch. Like he was just kind of going out on his own using ults. And I don't agree with that strat personally.
Yeah. It'll be interesting to see what version of Gladiators we see this next week, whether it is Patty or Ons.
Well, I think they keep Patty because Patapon gives like the flexibility, like he can switch over to Genji and stuff, whereas when Ons is in, you're hard locked into hit scan. So that's probably why they want Patapon in, is that if they need to, they can swap to those Genji comps, and Kevster can play Tracer and Patapon can play Genji. So I don't know. I think that they're really close though to getting their things together, because they were playing really well. And then like when they went to Midtown, like the Shock were doing some funky stuff. Like they put like Kilo on Tracer for the map.
I was gonna mention that they switched Kilo and Proper around. That was interesting, and it felt like it didn't look great on that map. But I will say, like the second half of the series, after that map, the Shock looked a lot stronger.
They started leveling up
back to the others, and so I think it might have been just a reset game. Like Proper needed to step away from the tracer just to kind of refocus his mind, and I
Yeah.
think it worked out.
Well, and we also found out after the match that Proper had food poisoning the day
Oh,
before.
yeah.
So this was actually his Michael Jordan flu game. And
I actually didn't hear that, and the fact that they came back and won against the Gladiators with that. That's
yeah.
pretty impressive.
Well, and I think the biggest thing was in the map 5 they decided to sub Salmon for Kilo, and that was an interesting choice because it's like nothing against Sam, but it's like when you're pulled into map 5 cold, like you haven't played the entire series, and you come in map 5 and are expected to just immediately jump onto performance level.
Well, especially playing a character like Genji
and Echo, yeah, it's just not.
Echo, yeah.
And I don't feel like he did terribly well either. Like it wasn't like he wasn't taking over the game on Genji. So it's like if Shock hadn't won that series, Sam probably would have taken a lot of the blame for that loss coming into map 5 like that. But they won, so it's not, the end of the world. They did pull off the reverse sweep and once again made the Gladiators sad and put them in an interesting position moving towards the end of the qualifying stuff for Kickoff Clash.
Yeah, exactly. Like they're definitely guaranteed in, right?
No, because Glad's now with that loss, they still have 2 more matches to play. I think.
Oh, I mean San Francisco.
Oh yeah, well yeah. With a win,
Glad's
Shocker 5-0, and they're playing Titans next week, which is going to be an Omega roll. So no, Shock I think Shock were already guaranteed in coming into this week, even with that, because of their map differential. But no, Glad's losing this week as well puts them in an interesting spot moving forward, and we'll talk about that later when we look at the standings and such. But I hope that Glads don't let this get to their heads and they're like boom them a little bit towards the end, and they're able to just fix the mistakes that they kind of had come out during this. Yeah. But I think Glads overall are looking like a good team, even though they did slip up a little bit. I think they look like a pretty good team. However, the team that didn't look good with their mistakes, a certain team from Washington, D.C., got beat by a professional organization, the Boston Uprising. So do we want to start with Boston on this one, or do we want to talk about Washington first?
Well, I think Washington is a much more depressing discussion, so I think we might as well start with them.
This is so on brand though, right? This is such a Washington thing to do, just lose and when they shouldn't.
Yeah, and Boston just looks bad. Like the fact that they have 2 wins is just painful. But that being said, okay, going into this week, because last week I had my big rant
on
talking
Boston,
about how Boston shouldn't be as bad as they are. And so I think, and I know we're supposed to be talking about Washington first, but I think this was Boston looking a little better than they were.
Yes, before. Boston looked a little better, but Justice
looked bad.
It's so weird though, because like they literally dunked all over Paris earlier in the week. Like Decay was sticking Khan like every time it seemed like, but then in this match he comes in and Decay just like was non-existent, and I feel like that's a theme when it comes to the Justice. It's like in order for the Justice to win, Decay has to like hyper Omega carry and just go Super Saiyan on the Tracer, and when he doesn't, they aren't able to do as much. But it also I watched it back a little bit, and I was looking at Justice, and it looks like Mag, the way that he was playing Winston, he was playing it into the Zarya comp the exact same way he was playing into like Atlanta Reigns Doomfist last week, and he just kind of like goes in and tries to take space. And against the Doomfist comp you can do that, because once the Doomfist is in, Doomfist is in. But against the Zarya comp, he jumps in and Boston just kind of bubble and then just mow him over. So he was kind of getting rolled a little bit, and then they were canceling out Decay and Happy and just letting Valentine and Victoria do their thing. So it was kind of a play style issue where Mag didn't change the way he was playing versus how they were playing against a Doomfist comp, but it also didn't help that they played Paris early in the week, who were just a doormat. So Washington didn't probably...
Well, and I don't think that the Justice expected Boston to come out looking as strong as they did and with as good of a read on the matchup as they did.
Yeah, that's also true. I'll give Boston that. But I mean, it's just Justice doing Justice things again. They literally like their ability to play and win the video game. They just forgot. They just forgot. They had a coma and just ceased. They were just like, oh, how do we play the video game? And Boston just walked. Punk and Crimzo specifically just kind of walked all over them. And Boston really did level up. Like literally between Saturday and Sunday, leveled up because against Toronto.
Man, what a professional organization.
Against Toronto, they looked so sad. It was the game against Toronto. My eyes, I actually lost brain cells watching that game. But then they come into this one and they just wake up. They suddenly just remember how to play the game outside of Circuit Royal because I don't.
We don't talk about that.
I don't know why they would sub in Itzal to play Winston on Circuit Royal, the map where even the Winston teams aren't playing Winston. So Circuit Royal, we don't talk about that. So you take that map out and they look good. Punk even looked good on the Winston, even though he was like Zarya was mainly what he was playing and was looking good on. His Winston was also looking really good. Crimzo was awesome. And Victoria apparently wasn't supposed to be playing this weekend. They were supposed to have a certain other DPS player play, but Victoria was kind of thrown in kind of last minute.
Victoria looked awesome. I was really impressed. We had talked in the past about Boston's biggest problem. This was even coming into the season. We talked about Boston's biggest potential issue being that their roster was too big and the coaches were going to throw because they wouldn't be able to figure out who should play when. And it seemed like this weekend, with this match in particular, they had a solid 5 people that were in most of the time. They made a couple changes, and most of those were pretty troll. But when they had that solid 5 with those two as the DPS line, it looked really good.
It looked really good.
And I think if they stick with that roster, which at this point, considering recent events,
do we want to talk about the events that happened this past week with Boston?
Let's talk about it. You probably followed it a little more than me.
So like we knew Halo reported, I think it was Friday or Saturday, maybe it was just Sunday, where he reported that Boston was going to release Marvel and Striker, because like over the weekend and even in previous, well, specifically this weekend, when they were playing against Toronto, it was like Valentine's playing the Tracer. He didn't look too great. We're like, why aren't you playing Striker? Where's Marvel? Why are you doing it? Was when Boston was looking bad and they were doing all their subs. But then we did get, that they released Marvel, was the first one who they released on Monday. They released Marvel. And then, but HUCK put out a statement afterwards talking about how Marvel's been struggling with some personal issues and how they felt it was best for him to leave the team and return to Korea to handle those issues. But he talks about how Marvel was super professional, was just really a good part of the team. They loved having him, and he was, uplifting to the team, but just personal circumstances.
And that kind of fits everything that we've heard about Marvel in the past.
So it's unfortunate. It's unfortunate that whatever he has going on, that he has to take a step away. But I hope that whenever he kind of sorts those things out, he's able to come back and is able to get picked up in another, stint in the league, because Marvel, I think, is a good tank player, is a good main tank player. And on Seoul, he was like kind of screwed over, like forced to play off, Sigma, and then it's like he hasn't had the greatest circumstances sometimes, but he's a great player from what we've heard and what we've seen. But then we go over to a certain DPS player. So Striker was also released. Now, the Marvel and Striker releases are unrelated. So from what it seems, whereas Marvel, it's like HUCK put out a long statement saying how professional he was, how much, he brought to the team. With Striker, the statement was really much business Inc. sign post. Like, he literally just says, we have concluded that where we are as a team is not the right fit for Striker at this point. He is a talented player and we wish him the best moving forward. That's it. And then on top of that, HUCK tweeted after they won against Justice, HUCK goes out and tweets, "No one player is greater than the team." So this seems to indicate that Striker was not. People were not getting along. Striker was not getting along with the team, and I mean, we've heard from some previous teammates and even some other sources right throughout that Strikers had funky temperaments with teams, especially if he's losing. Which begs the question, it's like, if he has problems when he's losing, why the heck did he join the Boston Uprising? Like, why didn't he go to a different team? So that doesn't make any sense. But then it's like,
well, I guess the question comes, like, was he even being sought after by other teams? And at this point, like, is he going to be able to find a team?
see, that's the thing. Because we know that Stryker has had some of issues here, and I mean, there were even rumors that he retired from Shock because he was having issues with Shock as well. I think all of those like ideas and the fact that he retired last year and then he's had problems, I personally don't imagine Stryker gets picked up by any other team. I mean, unless you're like Vancouver and you're super desperate for something, I think Stryker might be done. And even when he played this season, he didn't look as dominant as he had in the past. Like, yeah, he may be a slight upgrade over Valentine, but after Valentine's performance against Justice, I think that Boston are fine. And not having Stryker there now means they can just run Victoria Valentine. So I think it's definitely a benefit to the team to not have that extra, piece there anymore. Like, nothing against Stryker, but it doesn't seem like him and the team got along, and they just kind of got let go. So we'll see.
And with as sad as the circumstances are with both of these, in their own separate way, it's kind of sad. But I think overall it bodes well for the team. I think, like, just the fact that they looked as good as they did this week, which I'm not saying they're a top 5 team or anything like that. No, they're still like maybe lower middle of the pack with potential for growth, given the right circumstances. But that being said, that's a lot better than what they looked like coming into this week. Because, last week, I had my whole rant, and that's the thing. They looked like a bottom 2 or 3 team. And I think their roster doesn't reflect that. Like, I don't think that they should be. And I think getting rid of Stryker and Marvel, with as sad as it is, and I'm not saying they're bad players in any way. I'm just saying I think that Boston's biggest problem was they had too many people, dropping a couple. Now their roster has the perfect, I mean, they could probably, I think they've got a good roster. They've got the 2 tanks, they've got the 3 DPS, and then they've got 2 the 3 support, and then 2 DPS. And so they could probably use another DPS, but I think overall I'm fine with it. How they look, and I think this bodes well for the future.
I definitely think Uprising is trending upwards. We'll see what they're able to pull off in the coming weeks. Whereas Justice,
Uprising,
gosh dang it, the professional organization of the Boston Uprising shows promise. It looks like they've figured out how to play the game until they sometimes sub in random people. But as long as they stick to their core 5 with the Zarya comps, and if they have to play Winston, they play Winston. But I just think you keep those core 5 in. Don't be messing around with those 5. Keep Victoria, Valentine, Punk, Faith, like, just keep, and Crimzo, just MCD and It's all great players, but just keep that core 5. Keep them in at all times, and Boston, I think, will be doing great. So, like, those were, let's be honest, those were like the only 2 NA games this week that really
NA
held.
was kind of pretty.
It was a lot of stomps, and it was pretty bad. So though, it's like those 2 games, and Uprising Justice is only good because Uprising won. Had Uprising lost, it would have literally just been Gladiator Shock.
No, and I was really glad that it went the way it was, because, like, as I was watching the games, I was like, man, we will not have enough.
We won't have any
NA
North America content.
Like, this is gonna be sad. And then Boston won, and I was like, oh, we can talk about this for a while.
Especially
like,
it's topical as well, since you went on your rant last week.
Thank you, Boston, for listening to my rant. That's the thing, is they weren't going to, like, even after the Toronto game, they looked looking kind of rough. But then Saturday night they went home and they were like, remember what Bread and Rice said?
Oh yes,
we need to be better. And then Sunday they looked amazing. So you're welcome, Boston. You're welcome, Boston fans. It was all me.
Sure, I suppose. But enough about NA. So Asia started playing Overwatch 2 this week. They
Oh
they
yeah,
finally started to play, and it was madness.
interesting.
It was actual madness. So I think before we actually talk about the matches, I want to talk about just discuss some of the things that we saw from APAC that were interesting. So like we had ideas that APAC liked running the Zarya comps, and that was like Hanbin was saying that. But I didn't realize I don't think we expected them to be playing it the way that they were, because in NA in North America when they're running Zarya comps, it's mainly like Zarya Reaper, and like those two are you run those two together. But APAC was just running Zarya and then just running everything else. Like they were running Zarya with Soldier 76 Genji. They were running Zarya with Ashe Echo Mercy. They were running Zarya as just kind of like a core tank, and then they were just playing normal comps around it as opposed to running just the Reaper comps like North America was doing. And I wonder if that's the way that North America will trend as well, turning away from strictly Zarya Reaper and going more to Zarya Echo, Zarya Ashe, that sort of thing.
Yeah, and it did seem like some of the NA teams were starting to, like, I'm pretty sure, didn't we see the Ashe a little bit pop up in NA?
Yeah, so Shock ran it, but they weren't running Zarya. So it's just APAC was running Zarya very differently.
Yeah,
but
that's
APAC,
true.
like APAC was. Go ahead.
Oh yeah. I was just going to say the Ashe Echo Mercy comps in general were something new, because that wasn't something we saw in NA at all.
Well, because in NA when they run Echo, they don't usually put a Mercy pocket with it. So APAC definitely came up with that one.
And yeah, Ashe was an interesting pick. It looked really good sometimes. It looked really terrible other times.
It was Ashe. Most of the times we'd see teams pull out Ashe on like first point defense of like Kings Row or something, and then they'd get like bodied and then immediately swap to 76. And you're like, why did you even play Ashe in the first place? The only teams that seemed like they got value out of Ashe, at least somewhat, was Spark and Hunters when Leave and Shy were playing it. But even then, Spark didn't win lots of the maps that Shy was playing the Ashe on. So it's like I can understand why you play the Ashe, because the coach gun is really good at like removing the Winston dive when it comes in. But I just feel like you get more value out of Soldier. I mean, Echo is good because we know Echo is good. We've seen it from NA teams a bunch. I think having the Mercy pocket, I think the reason the Mercy pocket is there is because there's also Ashe as well. But I mean, like Fusion were doing it on Circuit Royal with Widow and running the Mercy. So I guess maybe they just want their Echo to get more value. So it'll be interesting to see how Ashe continues in the APAC meta. But man, there was something APAC was doing that I'm going to need them to cease and desist immediately. Could we not see Sombra play, please? for my well-being, could we just
like
not
every
do
time
that?
Sombra came out, it was just not good.
I don't.
It was like Dante Doomfist, like just terrible stuff.
Okay, so like in NA we saw like Checkmate play the Sombra, but like the Sombra had a purpose in use against the Doomfist, but like there was like barely any Doomfist. I think like Smurf played it for like a point or something. So the Sombra has no purpose. So like Seoul and Guangzhou pulled out this Sombra. Develop pulled it out the most on the Charge, and it was tragic. It was straight up just the most tragic thing. That Route 66 attack against Valiant. Please, APAC teams, listen. Don't play Sombra and stop. Just don't do it. Please, just stop. Don't do it. I beg of you, for my sanity, don't do it anymore. I don't want it. I do not want the Sombra. I do not like it, Sam. I am. But other than that, it seemed like a lot of the APAC teams were kind of just playing what was comfortable for them, the heroes that worked best. But I feel like that also led to a lot of underperforming and overperforming and a lot of inconsistencies, which led to some of the match results that we ended up with. So which team or match should we dive into first? I think
let's start at the top.
The upset of upsets.
I want to talk about Fusion because I was surprised. So pretty much everyone expected Shanghai to come out and be dominant this season. They have the same roster they won with last year, and they on paper should be the most dominant team. Just like the Fuel was supposed to be in NA. And then just like the Fuel did week 1,
They get bodied.
they just got bodied. And yeah, so Fusion, I will say Fusion looks like a real powerhouse in the East. And I think I definitely um I didn't expect them to look as good as they did, but they looked awesome. I thought
Fusion came
their
in.
DPS line was insane.
Zest is a bit of a freak, and even
Oh yeah,
MM3 is kind of a nutcase as well. But Zest on like
yeah,
the Echo and the Genji, and on the Tracer as well, he was just pounding everyone, just running kids over.
yeah,
And like Belis Rhea looked great on the tank. Fury continued to always look like every part of
yeah,
Fusion looked really good. And like that's like all there is to say about Fusion. They just looked awesome.
yeah.
Their DPS rookies looked fantastic, and that makes me like wonder is like, yeah, Carpe did get some playtime, but is he gonna get a whole lot of playtime? I would rather
don't
run
think so.
MM3 and
Yeah,
Zest rather than try and put Carpe into there, because those two
yeah,
were pounding this whole week. But
yeah. And it's kind of hard to find things to talk about them just because of how solid it is. You know, it's a lot easier to talk about teams' weaknesses than their strengths, and it really didn't look like there were any weaknesses
no,
to
not
Fusion.
currently.
And I think at this point it's really early to tell because we haven't seen them play all that much. They've had
Mhm.
2 matches, but at this point they have the potential to be top team in the world coming into the next few weeks, and so it'll be interesting
But then
to
on
see how
the flip side
they
of
look.
that match, the Shanghai Dragons kind of come in and get run over.
Yeah, it was
It was for that first match, they just kind of got diffed. It was a diff of every of mass proportions, similar to Fuel getting diffed by Outlaws. I think it may have just been first match jitters or something like that. But it was interesting because Dragons in their matches, like in their game against Fusion, they were mainly running Void. They were running those Zarya comps. But then when they played Spark, they moved over to bringing to bringing Fate in and playing a lot of the Winston comps.
yeah, and that was pretty interesting. I think I mean, obviously the Winston version of Shanghai looked a lot stronger than the Zarya.
Well, they were also
Um,
playing not
but
Fusion, so
that's true as well. Although the Shock looked pretty strong this week as well. Uh,
yeah.
that's the thing. The APAC is just confusing to me right now because it's like
What's the power level
anytime
of
you,
these
yeah,
teams?
because like you look at the Spark and it's like, yeah, they lost to Shanghai, and coming into the season we didn't have them all that high, but they beat Seoul, and so it's like, and they beat Valiant, but Valiant isn't anything spectacular.
But
But
Valiant
Valiant took
takes
2
Soul to
maps
5.
and then took Seoul to 5, but Seoul lost to the Spark. So is
Yeah,
Seoul
it's
just not
I don't
good?
know. So
Yeah,
like
it's a
I
mess.
think we take the Dragons match. So it's like the Dragons, because they were able to beat Spark, at least shows us that the Dragons are still like a really good team. They're just not
Yeah.
untouchable like they were last season. And
Yeah.
I think in the Spark match we saw a little bit more, but even in the Fusion match specifically, it's like we just took a time machine. It's like it's 2017 again. Who are you out here playing Genji and looking like he never left?
Yeah.
Even in the Philadelphia game, Who Are You was still popping off on the Genji. So I think it's going to be interesting to see what Shanghai does with the Who Are You Fleta rotation, because obviously you always want Lipin to play the hit scan.
Yeah.
So it's more so it's like, when do they want to play Genji? Or are they just going to keep Who Are You in? Because he played like Tracer on Eichenwald and stuff. And I think they prefer his Genji over having Fleta in to play some of those other like heroes. But I think they just need to get some of their stuff together. They kind of just flubbed against Fusion, came out a little flat,
Yeah.
similar to how Fuel did against the Outlaws. So I'm not worried about the Dragons. I think Fusion are just super good. So
Yeah.
you can't really harp on the Dragons too much for that kind of loss. And as long as they
Well,
get their stuff together.
and I feel like one potential issue with the Shanghai Dragons is, and I think I might have talked about this in our preseason uh, conversation in that episode, was just they have a lot of older players. They don't have any rookies, do they? Or they have one, right?
No, they don't. I don't think. No, they don't have any
Oh no,
rookies.
they have BB.
Because they brought
No,
Bebe. They brought
or
Bebe, but
yeah.
he's not a
But
rookie. They
he's
brought
not
him
a rookie,
over.
yeah. So that's the thing. It is Overwatch 2, it's Overwatch still, but there are differences in the strategies that need to be played.
Mhm.
And we can see that in the evolution of push and what's coming out on that and stuff like that. And so it's like there are some intricacies that were in Overwatch 1 that aren't in Overwatch 2, and vice versa, that are in Overwatch 2
Yeah.
that weren't in Overwatch 1. And I think as a result,
Mhm.
I think any team that doesn't have rookies is at a slight disadvantage coming into this game, because a lot of the intricacies of team play that were in Overwatch 1 aren't the same necessarily in Overwatch 2. And so, and that might be troll of me to say, but it's like, anytime you have big shifts in meta, even
Mhm.
you give lower teams with younger players an opportunity to show what they have. And I think Shanghai Dragons is just struggling with that. I think by the end of the season, if they're able to, figure things out, then they'll be fine. But honestly, if I was on Shanghai Dragons, you know, there's a reason why pro players in any esport only last a few years most of the time.
Mhm.
It's because it is so demanding, especially to keep up with changes in the game. And when you completely change the game from Overwatch 1 to Overwatch 2, it's like, how much can the players handle when it comes to changes? And so I think because of that,
Mhm.
Shanghai Dragons could have a pretty rough season. Or they could come back and just completely dominate, because they have the talent. It's just a matter of, do they have the drive?
I wouldn't say they're gonna come out and disappoint, but okay. I guess that's a take.
Yeah,
The
that's my
potential
take.
for it. So the Dragons, they looked good, but then they were taken to 5 by the Spark, the team that we didn't think were going to be able to. Well, so we thought the Spark had a good roster. We just thought they weren't going to be able to manage it well.
Yeah.
And they did okay this week. Well, better than okay. I mean, they beat Seoul and then took Dragons to 5. I'd say that the biggest takeaway from Spark are that Shy and Alpha Yi are kind of just
broken.
nuts.
Like, they need nerfs.
Like Alpha Yi,
they're so
especially
freaking
with
good.
Shy, we knew he was good from last season. We just didn't get to see a lot of him because Spark were doing the Spark things. But yeah, Alpha Yi on all the projectile stuff was looking pretty clean on all of those things, and they look like a really solid team. It's just my worry for Spark is their history of just whiffing hard with their roster and their comp choices, because we saw in their matches they did run Goushway and they ran Bernard, like they flipped between them. And when they brought in Goushway to play the Winston comps, they didn't look as good as when they had Bernard in playing Zarya. And I feel like it would be such a Spark thing to do, to just play Goushway all the time. Even though they look better with Bernard and Zarya, they'll be like, oh, we'll just run Goushway on Winston. But even when they had Bernard in, they like tried to pull some like diva shenanigans and like Eichenwald and stuff, and it just didn't work. And those are the instances where we see old Spark like kind of show its face, where we're like, don't do that. It's kind of like Boston, and they're subbing in Avitsal and MCD. We were like, why are you doing this? Why are you messing with things? I think if Spark just don't do that, they're gonna be okay. But the problem is them not doing that.
Yeah, exactly. And I think the Spark are the perfect example of what I love about APAC this year. It is so many of these rosters, they have this insane talent. They have crazy pop-off potential. Like you look at Alpha E, it's beautiful to watch. And it seems like just the talent on some of these teams in APAC, it just makes it so it's so competitive over there, where the Dragons can, be 3-0'd and still be, considered one of the best. And that's the thing is there's so much just upset potential in this region, where pretty much any team looks like they can take on any other team given the right situation.
Yeah.
Besides the Fusion looking absolutely cracked.
And it seems like situation, but then just like what version of a team shows up. And that's when I want to go in with Seoul, because Seoul, come into this game against Spark and just disappear. They're just gone.
Yeah.
And then they play the Valiant and they also just look a little lost. They just the Seoul Dynasty that played against Spark and Valiant were trying to do too much with Smurf. Like, I'm pretty sure, if I remember correctly, in those 2 matches he literally played all of the tanks that aren't Ball and Orisa. Like, he was playing Winston, he was playing Ryan, Doom, Sigma, Zarya. Like, Smurf's a great tank, but like, calm down. He can't do everything. And so they weren't able to like do some of the things they wanted to because they were forcing him onto these weird kind of roles. And I don't hope that they don't like do that again. Like, I think that they really should go and sign an off tank player to like take some of the pressure off of Smurf so that that doesn't happen. But like, it was just, they weren't able to really do anything because they weren't sure of what kind of comp. They were just trying to get too cute with the tanks. But then like, they go and play against Chengdu and holy slam, oh my goodness, they just decided, no, we're just gonna play Smurf Winston and the Prophet Smurf dive. That needs to be like regulated. Like, the esports commission needs to like regulate that dive. Like, Nisha and Monk were just getting farmed.
It was so good.
So it's like, it's the thing with this Dynasty team. It's like, one week they can just look like they don't exist, but then the next match, well, like the next day.
Yeah, I was gonna say, it's not even a different week. It's the same week. They have 3 matches. 2 of them they just look like garbage, and then the third they just destroy. And this isn't a crappy bottom of the league team, the Chengdu Hunters. They 3-0'd the Guangzhou Charge just the other day. So it's like, you have a team right off of a huge victory that just gets stomped by this team that looked really rough these first couple days. And so if the Seoul keep with the way they looked on Sunday, it's going to be a really good season.
They just need to lock in the dive, because it seems like Dynasty are the kind of team that just rely heavily on like individual pop-off moments. So it's like, they just hope that Prophet and Fitz are able to do something, and now they have Smurf, so they have a tank that can help with that. But they just need, if they can just get their teamwork together, and if they're able to do the kind of dives that they were doing against Hunters, against all of the other teams and all the other matches, then they're fine. But I know Seoul, and we know them from last year, that's not going to be the case. They're just going to disappear some weeks.
Yeah.
And that's what worries me.
Part of it is they have a small roster, but they're playing like they have a big roster. They're trying to bring out these weird picks that just they just need to choose their play style and stick with it. And
they need to find,
do the dive and just stick with it.
They need to find their play style, and I think they'll, if they can work that out, which I don't know, we'll see what Coach Toby can cook up for the Seoul Dynasty. But then the team that they just bodied were the Hunters, who I can't, do we fault them for the loss to Seoul? No, because Prophet and Smurf are just playing cracked out of their minds.
Yeah.
So I don't know that we can fairly rate the Hunters off of that match specifically. So I think more so what it is their match against Charge. Because when we were coming into the season, right after they had they lost to Prita and they lost Far Away, we were worried a little bit about their flexibility. And I think as long as Chengdu as long as double hit scan never becomes meta, I think they're going to be okay. Because Jinmu still pounds on Genji. He still pounds on Genji. So as long as they're able to play the Genji, and even on the Reaper, he looked good. I think they're fine. I think they'll be fine.
Yeah, I think Chengdu, it's one of those teams, I don't know if they'll make it to this first tournament necessarily, but we'll have to look. But yeah, they're one of those teams, I could see them losing to anyone or winning against anyone, just depending on the week. I feel like they look a lot better than they had the potential to be after the crazy off season they had. I was worried that they had the potential of coming in with just no focus, because it's hard to focus when you run the risk of losing your job, and so I was worried that might play into it, but they looked great great against the Charge. They fell apart against Seoul, but like you said, we can't really fault them for that. Seoul just looked insane. And I feel like Seoul has the type of roster that when they pop off, it's like
there's nothing you can do about it.
The game, and so it's like, and I feel like Chengdu doesn't quite have that same kind of pop off potential that Seoul has.
No,
But
they'll have moments like when like Leave will do
Yeah.
Leave things and Jinmu will do Jinmu things, but I don't think that they are.
Are you worried about their backline after that?
No, I thought Nisha
match?
and Monk I thought did okay. Like they did good, and I don't know. Again, it's like I don't know how I can't really fault them for getting turbo farmed by Prophet and Smurf because that dive was just crazy.
Yeah.
And they were just getting hyper pressured. But against the charge, they looked great. So I'm not worried about I'm not worried about the Hunters overall. I think that they will do okay. They just need to try and not get turbo farmed when they can help it. And I think they just need to figure out what kind of comps they want to run, because since they are somewhat limited, like they can't run Tracer hit scan like some other teams do. Like they can't do the Tracer 76 because their Tracer and 76 player are the same person. Leave can only do one thing at a time. So they're kind of locked into these Genji or Reaper comps, or these Genji Reaper comps, and that kind of puts a cap on the things that they can do. But Jinmu can play those to a high level. We didn't really see him on Echo at all, so maybe they could try and use some Echo comps like Echo Ash. Oh no, they did play some of that because Leave was playing the Ash. So they should be okay. It's just they can't go too far out into the comp stuff because Jinmu can't play it skin, which I don't think is going to be a problem right now. But I think as a team, their ceiling, I don't think that they're going to be able to break into the top 4 of APAC just because the teams above them are just insane.
And I don't think they're going to add anyone to the roster considering the current financial issues and stuff. And so I think the Chengdu we see now is the Chengdu will.
Well, and like the only thing that they would add would be another DPS player, because they added Daisy before things got started. So they have an off-tank player to go with Gaga, and I don't think Monk and Nisha are. I think they're doing fine. But
no, I think they're fine.
If they were to add someone, it would be another hit scan player, like Aprita was going to, because Aprita was going to be a hyperflex for him. So they just kind of have to do it with what they've got, and I thought they did well against Charge. Although, side note, Charge are that team. Yeah, they beat. They beat
we
Valiant.
Want to talk about the Charge now?
They beat Valiant, but other than beating Valiant, it's like, how impressive is beating Valiant, especially the first game of the season? Like Choice 01 looked good, and so did Faraway. Like Choice 01 and Faraway, despite the rest of the team, looked really good. But like Unique looked like he was struggling a bit on main point, and Rio looked tragic at times on that Winston.
Yeah.
Like he just whiffed. I don't think Rio is it. I don't think that they really have a whole lot of. You have Krong, I guess, that you can lean on to play like your off tanks, but Rio's not it on the main tank. And other than Choice 01 and Faraway, Unique looked like he was struggling, and Develop needs to just never play Sombra ever again. Don't do it.
Yeah.
Don't do it. Develop, please don't. All of APAC, don't do it. Like Fitz, I'm looking at you too. Don't do it either. But Develop, that
especially not Develop.
That point A Route 66 attack was the saddest attempt at they got 2 final blows. Rio got 100. He got a deadlift. He deadlifted the team. He got all 2 of the final blows. The Charge are just uninspiring. I don't know what else to say about this team, because at least the Valiant showed signs of life.
And that's the thing. I feel like the Valiant, because Valiant and Charge, they're both at the bottom of the standings. They have the same map differential, but I feel like the Valiant, they have like. First of all, Valiant coming into the season, we had pretty low expectations.
No expectations, next to nothing.
And so the fact that they did anything this week and they kept up map differential with the team that beat them, one of the teams that beat them, shows that maybe they aren't as bad as we thought they were. And Guangzhou, I feel like they're exactly as boring and as uninspired
as we thought they would be.
And so it's like, even though they're technically above Valiant in the standings and they beat the Valiant, it's
I would say Valiant are the better team.
And the Valiant are much more worth watching, because let's be real, I don't think either of these teams are going to get into any tournaments.
Probably not.
But the Valiant, they at least
they took Seoul and Spark the 5. Seoul, who beat Chengdu, and then Spark, who beat Seoul and then almost beat Dragons. Like Valiant showed some life. They in one
Yeah.
weekend won more maps than they did all of last year, which is I mean, that
so,
bar is like
good job,
so
Valiant.
low it's like beneath the ground. But go Valiant. I
Yeah,
thought
and I don't think they're going to go the entire season
they'll
losing.
they'll
I
take
think
some
even
they'll
in the
take
next
wins.
week, I wouldn't be surprised if they won something. You know, I'm not sure which match, but
they just showed life. Dia continues to look good. Dia was really doing all he could to carry, especially against the charge. But I didn't think Becky looked bad, and even when Ezhan came in to play the hit scan, he didn't look terrible. Sashin looked great on the Zarya, and I think they should just lean into the Sashin Zarya and just play because that's what he's comfortable on. Same with basically every other team in APAC, just play what they're comfortable with. Because Valiant, if they keep playing this way, they'll get some wins. Like they may not be able to make tournaments or make some massive splashes in the league, but I mean, after what happened last year, I think they definitely deserve it. And players like Dia specifically, I would just want Dia to succeed. Anyone who was on that season 1 Shanghai team, they just need something. Give them something, some hope.
Well, and the thing about the Valiant that it still confuses me. Like, I know why they have 5 DPS players. It's, you know, so they're covered no matter what. But why do they have 5 DPS players to cover all the holes and 1 solo tank player? Like, that's the thing that confuses me about the Valiant.
I don't know.
And I don't get it because you know, when asked about it, they're like, yeah, we want to be able to play in any meta. But what about the tank?
What about the tank? You gotta
is Assassin just supposed to cover all the whole? Like, I don't know. I guess so. I guess tank just according to Valiant, tank is unimportant. Skill.
Yeah, I hope Valiant. I hope Valiant pulls some things together. I'd like to see them get some wins. And you're right. I would much rather watch Valiant matches than Charge matches. Charge just. That team, if they cease to exist, I wouldn't bat an eyebrow. But that being said, Charge would beat the bottom 4 or 5 teams of NA.
Oh yeah, but
it's kind of
the NA. The thing about NA is some of those teams are so bad, it's fun. Like APAC, I feel like maybe it's just because they're so far away and I'm so tired when I watch their games, but I don't feel like them losing, it's not as charming as it is in NA.
When Vancouver just face
Vancouver face plants and you're like, oh, Vancouver doing it again. Guangzhou Charge, they lose and you're like,
gosh dang it,
that happened.
Man.
Oh well, that doesn't matter. I stayed up for this.
I hope that APAC just continues to be exciting moving forward. But you know, those are the matches and the teams that happened this week. But I think it's time to now that we have APAC finally, now we can actually do power rankings involving APAC. For once in our freaking lives, we can actually look at APAC for power rankings. But let's start with APAC. I feel like APAC's power rankings are a little easier to decode because NA is always just a mess, is just a dumpster fire. So I don't think there's any reasonable argument not to put Fusion first, right? After this week,
think they have to go first.
Now for second, even though Shanghai got bodied by Fusion, I think Shanghai still deserves a second spot, like easily, because they beat Spark. Unlike literally every other team below them, who just for some games just looked like they didn't want to exist. I think Shanghai at least showed that they're getting back on their feet. That they're not being boomed by the 3-0. So I would say Shanghai is definitely at least the second best team in APAC. Yeah. Any objections there?
I think there's an argument to be made that the Spark.
The Spark.
Sorry.
The Spock.
The Spock go above them. No, I think there's an argument to be made that this Spark looked stronger than Shanghai.
The Dragons beat the Spark.
Yeah, that means nothing.
And then the Valiant took Spark to 5.
Yeah,
you think Shanghai are going to be taken to 5 maps by Valiant? No, I don't think so.
I think it's possible.
I think Spark definitely made a strong case for third, though, like right behind Shanghai, but I don't think they're better than Shanghai.
Okay, we'll put Shanghai there.
I think Spark or third. I think do you agree with that? Like you're trying to say Spark could be second, Spark or at least third.
I think Spark.
And then I would say Seoul follow up fourth.
Yeah.
And then
Chengdu.
Chengdu, and Valiant, and then Charge. Even though Valiant lost to Charge, I think Valiant looked way better in the remainder of the weekend than Charge did.
Yeah, and plus I refuse to put Charge
Above Valiant.
above Valiant is like Spitfire to me. It's like there's a spot in my heart that's always going to place them like 1 or 2 spots higher than they should be.
Fair enough. I think those are good rankings. I feel like it was pretty easy coming out of this week to rank the teams. But then we look over at the NA side, and good heavens, I don't. Okay, so
we have to do this.
After this week, I would say Dallas Fuel are number 1 over Shock.
You would?
I would. What would you? Because the reason I say that is because I think the Zarya comps are stronger, and I think that's the way the meta is trending, and Shock has not played those at all. And so I think
that being said,
if Fuel and Shock played each other, I would predict Fuel.
That being said, what matters is which team wins matches, and I mean
both do.
But the Shock are still undefeated.
Well, yeah.
I think the Fuel aren't, and I think the Shock have more consistency.
Because the Fuel had stage fright against the Outlaws.
Yeah, but I think that because of that,
the Shock have not played anybody of any worth.
Are you saying the Glads are of 0 worth?
Well, no, but the Fuel also beat the Glads. Like, the only win that Shock has that Dallas don't is that Shock beat the Outlaws and Dallas didn't. But Dallas beat Toronto and Dallas beat Washington, didn't they?
Yeah. But still, the Shock hasn't lost a single match, and I think you can't put Fuel. You can't
put Fuel. I just think the Zarya comps are better. The Zarya comps are better, and Fuel are looking like one of the best teams in the world at that kind of comp. Whereas Shock only play the Winston. That's it. They just play Winston. They just play the Winston.
But wouldn't the team that... So you're saying the Shock are playing the worst team. I mean, the worst comp.
Not the worst comp.
Well, yes, no, not the worst.
I'm saying the Winston comp is weaker than the Zarya comp when an
wouldn't the
optimal
team
maps.
That's still undefeated playing a less efficient comp?
No,
wouldn't that become better?
Shock hasn't played a good Zarya comp team. They've just played other Winston teams in Doomfist. Whereas Fuel are playing everybody else that plays Winston comps and beating them. I think if Fuel and Shock played this weekend, Fuel would come out on top.
I think it's a possibility, but it's hard to say. And I think the Shock are able to make adjustments and win games.
Well, so
Fuel aren't necessarily.
They won
with
Hanbin Winston. They won with Hanbin Winston against another good team.
But they got 3-0'd by the Outlaws. And I think while that's there, you can't put them above Shock until they play each other. And
okay, we'll leave Shock at 1, but I disagree with it. But Glad's 3, right? Glad's 3. That's
Glad's 3.
Okay, now we get into the chaos that is.
Didn't we have Washington next?
We have Washington next.
Yeah, that's
all right. Washington goes down to the bottom of this middle tier, correct? Above London.
Yeah, below London.
No, above London. Stop it.
Below London, above Atlanta.
Above Atlanta? No.
Below London, above Atlanta. So London, Washington, Atlanta. I'm just kidding.
No. Okay, we're Atlanta, Washington.
Okay, yeah.
And then next up is Defiant, and Defiant against Boston on Saturday looked, though they won, ever since I started playing with they have not looked inspiring at all.
Yeah.
So I would say current strength Toronto is like above Justice, below Atlanta.
Yeah. And then would you keep Houston
no,
fourth?
I would put Atlanta 4th, because Atlanta this week, even though it was against the Titans, they showed that they are capable of moving away from the Doomfist because they brought in Gator, Winston, and put Venom on the Tracer. Whereas Outlaws, every time they've played something that's not Doomfist, it's looked tragic.
Yeah.
So I would say Atlanta is 4th, and then Outlaws, and then Mayhem.
Which, man, Houston, they're a weird team this year.
They are, and I am worried about them moving into the future because it's like when they aren't playing Doomfist, like I don't know what, like in the kickoff clash, they'll probably be able to beat like Toronto and Washington because they'll probably just fall flat on their faces. But like if they have to play Shock, Glads, Fuel, they're just gonna get run over.
Yeah.
But
Yeah.
I think fourth, fifth is. I don't
Man,
think you
we
can.
just got.
I don't
I've
think you
just
can
got to
put.
say, this week's game, Houston, London, that was tragic.
What'd you?
Because
I told you.
which
I told you
the
it was
worst
going
thing
that
about
way.
it, the terrible thing was when Houston swapped to
Rhine and then
the Rhine comps and still won the map. And it was crazy because
London threw
it
that
was
map
Circuit
though.
Royale, right? Yeah, Circuit Royale. London full pushed
like
with time to spare, and it was amazing. It
Hottie
was
diffed
beautiful.
Piggy on the Reinhardt. London just
Yeah.
threw the map. They
And
threw.
then it was
So anyways,
it was terrible. It was so bad. But anyway,
so,
yeah, that's
where so London are currently, what is that, in the 10th, 11th, 12th? No, they're 9th. London are currently 9th.
Yep.
But what do we do with Boston? Because Boston are
I moved them above Excel.
I would move them above London. I think current strength Boston beats London. Like, yes,
I think Boston still they still haven't proven themselves enough. I think this week, yes, but are they consistent enough to?
That's true, and I mean they aren't.
And
they
so
don't
I think
get
at this point I'd still put them above London, but that could change easily.
above
like this
London.
Week's,
You mean you put London above
below.
Boston?
Yes,
I do think that Boston has been able to. Like, they're definitely above New York, but I wouldn't even say they're in the same tier as New York and Paris. I almost think that Boston and London should be in their own tier.
Yeah, where it's like they aren't actually
like
bottom.
They aren't bottom, but they will be able to maybe be competitive if a middle tier team kind of just flubs it like Washington did. And they'll beat New York and Paris every time, and then poor Titans in the cellar. Oh, Titans, what are we gonna do with you?
Just
this poor.
Yeah, who are the Titans?
This poor sad team, and what makes it even worse is they play Shock this week.
Wait, the Titans, isn't that Contenders team that?
Oh no!
Isn't in the Overwatch League?
Relegation. Here we go. Relegating the Titans. Man,
oh wait, no, they wouldn't even be competitive in Contenders.
Oh. Well, okay.
Okay, that's a hot take.
Okay, so Shock, Fuel, Glads in the top tier was 1, 2, and 3,
Yeah.
and then Reign, Outlaws, Mayhem, Defiant, Justice in like the middle tier. London, London, Boston in their own like upper or lower tier. New York, Paris in the low tier, and then Titans in the proverbial dumpster fire that is bottom.
So with this, we do have a tier break right under the 8 spot. So do we think it's pretty certain that it's going to be Shock, Fuel, Glads, Reign, Outlaws, Mayhem, Defiant, and Justice?
So when we look at the top 8 in the standings for NA, that is the top 8 that we have are the top 8 that we have ranked. They're a little different because of records. So like because Gladiators lost 2 now, they're 8th. Glads are in that 8th spot.
Yeah.
And Reign are in 3rd. Mayhem are above Outlaws because of map differential. Justice are above Defiant because of map differential. But the current top 8 teams that we have in our power rankings are the current 8 best ranked teams. And when we look at the records, like Shock and Fuel have basically guaranteed they're in the kickoff clash.
Yeah.
And then we have a bunch of 3 and 2 teams. So the Mayhem, the Outlaws, the Justice, and the Defiant, who have all played 5 matches, who are looking to get in there. But when we look at the future schedule, right, Outlaws play Paris. They win that. Like, unless they just flub it horrendously, which there is a universe in which they do, but probably not, right? They win that match. So Outlaws go 4-2. 4-2, they'll make it. 4-2, they're in. But like Mayhem play Justice. Justice and Mayhem have 1 match apiece left, and they play each other. So the loser goes 3-3. And the reason why 3-3 is important is because Boston and London both still could go 3-3. Boston, it's unlikely because, you know, they play Dallas next week. And I don't even think...
They also play Atlanta.
No, Boston only plays Dallas.
Oh, yeah.
Boston's not winning against Dallas. Like, there's no way. So Boston is out. So
Yeah.
the only remaining team that could somehow sneak into the kickoff clash is London, because London plays Gladiators and Reign next week.
Oh yeah.
And if they win at least one of those games, they go 3-3. And then, Florida or Justice, one of them has to go 3-3. Glads also play Atlanta, and if they lose that one, they could also go 3-3. If Atlanta loses to London, they could go 3-3. So it's like there are a lot of teams that could go 3-3. And even when we look at, Toronto, let me see, when we look at the Toronto, the week, when we look at hang on, I gotta get through to. Let's see, Toronto next week. They play. There it is. Oh, wait, that's not it. Okay, so next week Toronto plays New York. Oh, they play New York.
The New York. We've said this before. New York has the players that they should be able to contend with some of these teams. So
yeah, it's like if you're rooting for London, like you perpetually are. Then
I have no idea what you're talking about. I'm a completely unbiased. Professional. I am this professional organization that is me. Completely unbiased towards London.
Yes, like if
London, that being said, London's like guaranteed in.
If London, if London wants in, then they have to be rooting for all of the upsets, because they need more than one to happen to hope that map differential goes their way, because they're currently at 2-2. They're at 2-2, -1, and there's no way they're beating Glads and Reign. There's no way, and even beating one of those teams is like a pipe dream. But they are still theoretically in contention. But it's like they have to win one of them and then not lose the other one horrendously. Because if they win one of them 3-2 and then get 3-0'd, well, then they're sitting at -3. And that they would have to then hope that, actually at that point, there's no way. They would have to hope Atlanta gets turbo stomped by Glads. And even then, they would have to then roll Atlanta themselves. So they have to play well. They have to win convincingly in the one match they win, and then hope that Toronto or Justice or Mayhem just lose their match horrendously and go deep into the negative map differential so that London can jump them. It's so unlikely, though. Part of me wants chaos and hopes that Toronto loses, or that Atlanta just fumbles, or that Glads fumbles, so that London can get in, so that they can then just get turbo rolled in the kickoff clash.
But what if they miracle run it and
win the whole thing with Reinhardt?
They aren't going to win the whole thing.
Yeah, no, I am rooting for some upsets this week, so that London might be able to get in, because this week all of the matches outside of Shock Titans do have playoff implications. Like, Outlaws should beat Paris, but if Outlaws lose to Paris, well, now Outlaws are 3-3 with only plus, 3 map differential at most, which could drop them in the seedings. So we'll have to see how the week kind of progresses with some of those matches. But let's actually take a look at some of these week 4 matchups. Let's do some Preds. Are you ready for some Preds?
Yeah, let's do it. Are we going to start with APAC?
Let's start with what we determined to be what should be the 2 best APAC games, starting with Seoul versus Shanghai. So the Seoul Dynasty turbo just ran over the Hunters, but then had to take 5 maps to beat Valiant, and then were beat by Spark. Whereas Shanghai got stomped by Fusion, but then beat Spark, who beat Seoul. So it's a weird circle of. I
think this game will kind of help resolve some of the circle things.
This whole weekend will, because Shanghai plays 4 matches, Fusion plays 4 matches, and so do the Charge. That is a brutal schedule. I don't care how good of a team you are. 4 matches in 4 days. So, we can't even look at the APAC standings and theorycraft who can make it in or not, because at most they've played 2 or 3 games.
Yeah.
We still have a whole weekend. So
we're still gonna make Preds anyway.
Seoul, Shanghai. I'm believing in the Dragons here. What about you? What say ye?
I think it's gonna be a close one, and I think it could go either way, depending on who's in the right mindset and stuff. But I'm gonna go Seoul on this
You're
one.
gonna go with the Dynasty.
Yeah.
So
And I think
my thing is like Dynasty looked good when they were playing the dive and running over the hunters. However, Nisha and Monk aren't Li Gon and Izayaki. I don't think that Seoul will be able to run that super aggressive dive as successfully against Shanghai, who could then also run it back into them. I think Dragons will be able to plan better for Seoul than Seoul will be able to plan for Dragons. But it'll be close.
This last weekend was Seoul's 3 games in 3 days week.
True, they only have 2 games this week.
They only have 2 games while Shanghai has 4.
Yes,
and so I think because of that, Seoul is able to put more focus on the Shanghai game.
But we both agree it'll be close though, right? Like probably
I think it'll be close. That being said, with seeing both teams, I mean both teams got 3-0'd, right? Or
no. Seoul took a map off. I think.
That's right.
Or maybe 2.
But that being said, it's like both teams at their worst have the potential to just get rolled
by the other.
And so it's like, it should be close on theory. And I think each map will be close.
Mm-hmm.
But I think there's a chance that it ends up being a 3-0 with each map being close. I suppose.
But we're splitting the decision and it's close. Yeah. However, I do want to the Dynasty only have 2 games, but what's their other match that week? Oh, would you look at that? They're playing the Fusion.
And I think they get stomped.
I do too. I also
there's
think
no chance they win this. I mean, there is a chance.
There's a chance,
but I don't think it's gonna happen.
No, I think Fusion take this one.
I think Fusion at this point is just on another level.
Fusion
when it comes
are
to APAC.
currently.
I think any team in APAC can take games off of any other team in APAC outside of the Fusion. I think right now the Fusion after week 1, I don't know that anyone's really going to be
competitive
contesting them at the top. Yeah.
Yeah.
At least for the next couple weeks. I think, if there's a meta shift or at this point, because there's so much variety in team comps and stuff like that, that could always change. Someone could find something that's just unstoppable and just start rolling. And so if something like that happened, like a big meta shift, then the Fusion could, but as it stands right now, no one's going to take games off.
Yeah, Fusion are going to take down Seoul. So those are just the 2 APAC games. So we're split on the first one and we agree the second one. But then we move over to the NA games, which have a bunch of playoff implications, which I guess APAC does as well, but they aren't as obvious because we don't know what's going on. Yeah. But with these NA games, we have a very clear, as we just talked about, there are some very obvious games that are going to determine some seeding. The first of which is Gladiators versus Rain. This one will, because the Rain are currently at 3-1.
3-1.
And the Glads are at 2-2. So if Rain lose this one, they're at 3-2, and then suddenly the game against Spitfire, although they play Glads second, I think. Confirm that for me, though. The order of the Glads games, because Glads play Rain and then they also play Spitfire. So it's like Spitfire play Rain and Glads, Rain plays Spitfire and Glads. So it's like those 3 teams.
So it's Glads in London on Friday.
And then Glads Rain.
It's Atlanta, London on Saturday. Okay.
So then the Glads Rain game.
The last game of the week is Glads Atlanta.
Oh, so this game's actually okay. So there's a world in which we go into that game where the loser goes home.
Yeah.
Well, probably not.
Probably
though,
not,
because unless Rain or Glads get just rolled by Spitfire, which I don't think we live in that universe.
I like that world. I like that universe.
I don't imagine that Rain or Glads will have a low enough map differential to be at risk of getting booted out. I think the teams that will be at risk if they lose will be Mayhem or Justice, Washington. Whoever lose that, or Toronto if they lose to New York.
Yeah.
I think Glad's map differential is fairly low. So if they lose against Rain, then they may actually, if they lose to Spitfire somehow, then they may actually be needing some help. But anyways, who are you taking in the Glad's Rain matchup?
I've got to go with the Glads on this one. I think, the Glads right now, their win-loss looks a little rough, but if you look at who their losses are,
the 2 best teams,
it makes sense. And so it's like, I think there's a reason even though the standings don't reflect it, we keep putting Glads in the top 3 or 4. It's because they are
They've
one
played
of
well.
the best teams, and they play well. And even when they lose, it's close. And I think Atlanta just isn't quite as good as Glads.
Yeah, I'm also predding Glads. I think this is looking like a 3-1 probably, because the thing is that if Atlanta truly has moved over to like the Winston comps, I don't see how they beat Glads at all. Reiner is better than Gator. I definitely think Ons or Patapon, whoever plays in Kevster, are better than Nero, Kai, and Venom. I just don't see Atlanta taking it.
And Atlanta have had times when they've looked kind of rough against some weaker teams, but Glads, they're really consistently strong against. I mean, especially this last week, they looked really strong even when they lost, and so I think
they're looking pretty for kickoff clash qualification.
Oh yeah, so I'm not worried. You know, like it's easy to look at the standings and think that they're on a fire seat or something, but no, I think Glads are guaranteed in unless something crazy happens.
But then we have a clash of 2, 3, and 2 teams where these two, Florida versus Washington, this one could potentially, if London does some upsetting, this one could have a very minor potential to potentially kick somebody out, depending on how poorly one of the others performs. I have full faith in the Mayhem. I don't think after Justice,
I think it's gonna not even be close. I think it's gonna be a 3-1, 3-0.
After how Justice looked against Boston, there's a Mayhem all the way. Please, take it from them. Go 4-2, Mayhem. You deserve it.
Well, and I think the thing about Mayhem is they will lose every time they play against the top teams, but they'll beat every lower team, you know? And so I think, I think Washington's just not as good as them. And plus Florida has fun while doing it. So they'll get the brownie points too.
Someone is just a Chad. Someone is actually just a freak of nature and is dancing permanently. He's just always happy. He's always giddy. So Mayhem take this and they secure their kickoff clash spot. But now we have the funky. So if Rain do lose, if we do know that Glad's Rain is the second match, but they play Spitfire first, and the only reason this one is here because you wanted to pred this one on broadcast. You wanted to pred it live.
Think about this, because when I pred this,
you're gonna look like an oracle.
I'm gonna look amazing. And if it isn't true, then I'll just look like a Spitfire fan. So it doesn't matter.
You think the Spitfire are going to beat the Rain, and I say stop that. Get off of whatever you're smoking. You need to cease.
I think it's possible. Is it likely? Absolutely.
Absolutely not.
It's what you don't realize is that the Spitfire have been holding back. This last week was a prep week.
Oh, they're going to take off the training
next week. Yeah. So Glads will be a close game. It'll probably be a 3-2.
No, but Rain, that's the second game for Rain. They play Spitfire first.
No, I'm saying Spitfire's game against the Glads. It'll be a close game. It'll be like a 3-2. And then they'll go against the Rain and just stomp them 3-1. Spitfire wins. Easy.
3-2 on the Glads. Oh my! Rest in peace, your pick'ems. In the Shadow Realm, like if Rain do lose this game to Spitfire, which probably is not going to happen. If they do, then that Glads game is like that is their win or go home. Because if they lose to Spitfire and Glads, they're out. They're 2-4. They're not making it in on that.
See, and my thought about the Rain, the reason why I think Spitfire stand a chance is, the Rain looks good, but they aren't the best at adjusting to weird stuff. I think...
And Spitfire is?
And the Spitfire is weird stuff.
But they don't know how to adjust either.
But they don't need to adjust. Yeah, but the thing about the Spitfire, especially because like with this being the last week before the tournament, I wouldn't be surprised to see Spitfire throw out something completely wacky. They're gonna bring out the Orisa.
You're off the goop.
I think it's possible. I think
you're off the goop. You're being paid off.
And it's gonna be glorious.
No.
And do you know what else is glorious?
No.
The fact that Mountain Dew chapstick,
I hate
just
it here.
like it's amazing. It's like all the joy of drinking the beverage, but you don't even have to drink. You can just eat it. I'm just kidding.
Whoa, wait, hang on. Whoa, hang on. Whoa. Anyways, those are some
That's
of the
crazy,
picks.
but do you know what isn't crazy? The fact that the Spitfire are going to beat the Rain. GG easy. Go home, Rain. Spitfire all the way.
Let's get to the play of the week, or in the case of this week, the anti play of the week. So the Dragons got kind of bodied by Fusion, and I really think that this play right here on King's Row, I think it just kind of encapsulates all that happened. Like,
it was beautiful.
Like we just look at this, and they've won. The King's Row is won. They've won this map, and then Lee Jae-gon just goes and just ints. He wants to kill MN3 and he doesn't, and then Izayaki gets picked, Void gets slept, and he's done, and then suddenly Philly just run the whole map back, and then 3-0. Like, Shanghai they just turbo fed. They got a little too angry. They wanted the kill too badly, and they just poof disappear.
The thing about it is, it's really a beautiful thing. It's like looking in a mirror.
Thing.
It's like watching replays of my own games where I do something stupid, and it's like I am as bad as a Shanghai player. I'm just kidding.
As bad as a Shanghai. All right, that's an interesting phrase.
No, it's a glorious play, and
I wouldn't call it glorious. I would call that, inting. But okay.
But it's a beautiful int. There are bad ints, and they're beautiful. It's like when you charge in with Rhine and miss your pin
and go off the map.
And go off the map, and as you're falling, the Sigma throws a rock and hits you, so they get the kill credit too.
Yep, rock.
And it's like, yeah, it's like it's terrible, but it's beautiful too, know. And it shows that these players are human too, Sometimes it's easy to forget that.
Yeah, we're not all superhuman.
Yeah.
Unfortunately.
Although the Dragons kind of are anyway.
They just got beat by Fusion.
Yeah, but they're still insane.
This clip that they aren't a superhuman. They just got boned.
Yeah. Well, anyway, yeah, good stuff. Crazy
Fun week of matches. APAC is back, but this week, so much APAC this week. This week, we had 18 matches last week total across both regions. This week, there's 20. 20 matches to wrap up the kickoff clash. And the next week, they're heading to Dallas. They're doing the in-person events.
Oh, yeah.
And next week, we'll talk about the kind of preview to the kickoff clash. Probably do some bracket running, getting brackets boomed. Don't say it. Don't do it. Don't do it.
It'd be so nice to be able to go. If you wish that we could go, or if you wish that you could go, comment below.
Wait a minute.
Also, like and subscribe while you're at it.
Don't. I thought you were about to say something about London. I thought you were about to. Anyways.
No. And don't forget to hit the bell when you subscribe so you can get notifications for all of our new content.
All right. Well, enjoy the matches in this coming final week of the Kickoff Clash, everyone, and we will see you all next week.
Peace.